In Florida, they are leading the way in investigating this crime and getting convictions. Testing for proof of drug rape. Blood and urine will provide the only evidence. A conviction may well depend on it. But you have just 72 hours from the time you have been raped for the evidence to be found. After which time, the drugs will have been metabolized, leaving no trace whatsoever. One of America's leading prosecutors in the fight against drug rape is Bob Nichols.
We consider this to be a very serious problem in southern Florida. It's a big problem across the United States. And I think what you have to understand is that this is a very sophisticated type of sexual battery. We take sexual battery in general very serious, but whenever it reaches the sophisticated level of a drug rape, we take it very seriously.
This family of pills, known as benzodiazepines, are used as tranquilizers and pre-surgical anesthetics. With the street name Roofies, the most notorious of them all is Rohypnol. Rohypnol is around at 10 times the strength of Valium, and its known side effects include blackouts and amnesia. It is still available in Britain on private prescription. However, proven to have been used in a number of drug rapes in the USA, Rohypnol is now banned throughout the country. Lisa Celestine and her friend Ondina were both drugged with Rohypnol and raped. Ondina remains very traumatized and is on medication.
Well, I had went out to a local nightclub with a girlfriend of mine, and it was ladies' night, so we went to have a couple of beers, and which we did, and she ran into two men that she knew. One of the men had bought us all a round of B-52 shots. It's amaretto and Kahlua. It's very dark in a small shot glass. He then turned, picked up mine first, and specifically handed it to me. I remember doing the shot, setting the glass down, and then I was out. When I woke up that morning, I had no clue that I had been raped. I was not sore. The only thing that was on my mind was getting to work. That was the only thing that I could focus on. My sister told me that I called her and said, I think that I've been raped, and I don't remember that. And I was awake then, and she goes, what do you mean you think you were raped? So somewhere in my subconscious I knew, but the denial was there.
Lisa, as do many of the victims, actually woke up in the middle of the sexual assault. She was shocked back into consciousness, but it only lasted 30 seconds to a minute, which is what we find with a lot of victims. They have these periods of lucidity where they accurately remember what happened. What Lisa remembers would be a scene right out of hell. She saw this guy taking her shirt off, a stranger that she had earlier rejected. She couldn't move her arms, she couldn't move her legs, she could barely speak, and that's because of the effects that Rohypnol has on you.
As Lisa tried to piece together what really happened, she was persuaded by a friend to join her at a local bar.
She thought it would be therapeutic, and I thought it would be too, and I decided to go out. When I went out, my rapist, Mark Perez, approached me. He was there with another man, and he came straight over to me. I was frozen in fear. And he came right over to me. He was a big guy. He grabbed me, he pulled me into him and said, I didn't expect to see you out so soon. Well, right then I knew, and I was furious. I started a big scene at the bar that he had raped me. All these people, all the men started gathering around. He's putting his hand up. He's saying, lovers quarrel, lovers quarrel. And I could not believe it. And I ran into the man that was with him the night of the rape. He grabbed hold of me, and I said, get away from me, you rapist, too. And he says, no, 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 you got me all wrong. I'm not a rapist. I said, as far as I'm concerned, you are. Get away from me. So he then pulled me by the arm, pulled me to the side, and admitted that Mark Perez drugs women with Rohypnol and rapes them. but it's okay because he wears a condom. The only thing this drug is good for is what they're using it for. It's a crime in a pill. It's perfect. It is absolutely perfect because the woman will not know what happened for 2 days afterwards. And who, I don't know, I don't know how much he gave me. And of course, the thing that just drives you the most crazy is, was he alone? Were other men there? What did he do? What did you do? It's horrible.
State Attorney Bob Nichols successfully prosecuted Mark Perez. He is serving an 8-year jail sentence. Even though the laws between the two countries are different, the effects of drug rape on the victims are the same wherever they are. Agata Varela and Martha Musset have been friends for several years.
You wouldn't say I come from Haters, would you?
Lovely. Martin does it.
One night out in a London bar and after a brief conversation with two strangers, a shattering experience was to follow.
We had a drink that was on the bar. Could have been them who bought it, could have been the one that I bought, I'm not sure. Drank it and don't remember an awful lot after that.
I just got to drink, got my first tequila, and that was it. And it was gone. That's, quickly as that. I think I slightly remember my eyesight sort of getting blur, but it was so instant.
I literally remember stepping back from the bar and nothing more. And then we came round. And it must have been simultaneously. It was moments that we came round because there was a kind of moments of consciousness, and there were these two men at the bar who'd been at the bar who were there, and a third man, and things were happening, things were going on.
It was like a horror really scene going on. There were three men, two in the bed, one sort of half the bed, everybody was naked. Somebody sort of trying to put Martha, so I just tried to sort of reach to Martha, and I mentioned her name, and I was trying to get the person, move the person away, and that's all I remember.
And the next thing was, some hours later, coming round again, and I was in the middle of getting dressed, semi-dressed. I was fairly conscious of the fact that I was uncomfortable with my body, being that exposed, and one of the men was kind of shouting orders in a foreign language at another man who was there, and I felt obliged to follow this other man somehow, just because, I don't know why, it was just what was happening.
There was this man on me, and I was trying to just sort of move and push, but it's just like you just can't move, and then I collapse again.
And I was aware that there was a man still in with Agata, and I didn't know what to do at all. So after a while, I went in and shouted at him. I told him to move, to get off of her, to stop. And the voice that came out of me was like a teacher's voice. It was like, instructing this man to stop, and that's when it kind of started to end. And Agata kind of got away and was starting to get dressed herself, and we wanted to know where we were, and they told us that we were in Fulham.
Martha and Agata returned home at dawn. As the effects of the drugs wore off, the flashbacks began. It took 2 days for the self-denial to recede and for the trauma which would inevitably follow to emerge.
I spoke to Agatha a couple of times over the next few days, and she was telling me what had happened. But I could say, yeah, it happened, but I couldn't take it on, what had happened. I didn't want to. And then I thought over the weekend, because it was a Tuesday when we'd gone out for the evening, I thought over the weekend I should maybe tell somebody the story. And I tried to contact Rape Crisis and constantly got an answering machine and whatever. And then I phoned a very, very good friend of mine and asking him how he was, and he was asking me how it was. And I just decided I had to tell him. Well, I just said a peculiar thing happened to me, and I began to tell him, and as I told him was when it's almost like the experience came into me. It was like accepting what happened. And from then, I just felt pain.
First fear of most of everything was AIDS. You know, it was the first thing that came through my mind. You know, I have a stable partner. You know, I don't have contraception. You know, because I know what I do, and it's just like, you know, this could ruin my life completely. You know.
Traumatized by their experience, Martha and Agatha reported their rape to the police.
The first few months, I just every day I'd have a shower and go to college in the morning. And by the time I arrived, I was drenched in sweat. I felt like I smelled horrible. Everything about me was horrible. I felt so invaded. So, I mean, I was seeing somebody at the time, and they left because it was too big for them to deal with. And it felt like there was nobody I could allow close enough to me. And I couldn't protect my kids, and I couldn't, like, everything. Every sense of safety that I've developed, you know, had gone out of the window.
During this period of when we went to the police and talk and all that, then my body started to change quite a lot, and then I knew, well, I could guess that I was pregnant in a way. So I became pregnant of this rape, and well, that you know, I had to ask various tests, and that was when it happened eventually, and I cooperate with the police full time with everything, to the point that it came to the day I had the abortion, so he could take DNA from the fetus. Yeah. Not that I have heard anything about it yet. It's going to be a year.
Although Martha and Agatha insisted they had been brutally raped, the 3 accused men said that consent had been given. Rohypnol, described in America as the monster drug, it is still available in 80 countries around the world, including Britain. It is prescribed to over 1 million patients a day, in particular for severe sleeping disorders.
So, start off with the pill.
A test was conducted to check the effects of Rohypnol using a volunteer under the supervision of a doctor of psychology. After it was cleared by the head of ethics at University College London, Becky was given a relatively low dosage, together with a glass of wine.
The line, as to how you're feeling right now. So at the
Becky was given a series of mood, memory and cognitive tests to carry out. The most important of these would be the memory test.
Okay, for the next couple of tests, we're going to use the tape.
Right.
For the first one, you'll hear a story on the tape. So I've asked you to tell me as much as you can remember of the story you've heard.
Right.
Okay?
Thieves escaped with an estimated £800,000 in jewellery and antiques yesterday after a raid on the Knutsford home of Sir Charles Melton. Local police are collaborating with CID in the belief that the same gang of thieves are responsible for this and two similar thefts from large houses in Cheshire last month.
Okay.
Yes.
Tell me.
Oh, and I'm to tell you that. Okay, thieves took £800,000 worth of jewellery and antiques from the house in Cheshire of Sir Charles Melton, I think. Police are working with CID to catch them. They've done similar crimes in Cheshire.
Becky was able to carry out these tests with ease.
That's great, thanks. And
She was then left alone for an hour for the effect of the drug to take hold.
Good afternoon.
Linda Greenwood, a solicitor with her own practice in Knaresborough, Yorkshire, has set up the only helpline in the country that deals specifically with drug rape victims.
I need to talk to you about something. We've had a letter in on this one, and we're under a bit of time pressure now to get that analysis in by the 13th of
Linda is herself a
How
victim.
far have you got now? I was a member of an introduction agency, and I'd met this guy two months previously, and we'd been out together twice. On the second time we went out together, I explained to him, or I thought I had explained to him, that I wanted to be friends and nothing more. And he seemed to accept that and was quite happy to be friends. So on the third time we went out, I had established enough trust for him to come and pick me up at home.
Linda was then taken to a bar in York.
It was busy, and he asked me what I wanted to drink. So I asked for a glass of house champagne. So I took the first sip of the drink and was just in ordinary conversation. And I'd had no more than 2 sips of the glass of wine when I'd just lost reality altogether. Everything disappeared, and I can remember nothing more until I woke up the next morning in my own bed, feeling extremely ill and realising that I'd had sex with somebody, and I presume it was him. Physically, I felt really ill. I managed to get to my little bathroom and have a drink of water, and my head was so aching, it was like a migraine. And I didn't know at that stage, I didn't really know what had happened, and I was just concerned with how ill I felt. It wasn't until I came across another victim who told me what had happened to her that I realised that that's more than likely what had happened to me, although, and this is why I've never taken the case forward, I still can't be absolutely sure. I have a very strong suspicion, and that's as high as I can put it.
Catherine, although this is not her real name, came to Linda Greenwood for help. They had known each other for many years on a professional basis. During a visit to see a client, Catherine was offered a drink.
Everything seemed normal, and we were talking. And I took a sip of the coffee, which didn't taste very nice. It was just like a nasty drink, really. It like a cheap coffee. Didn't really enjoy it, so I didn't drink much. And he asked me where my favourite place was, which I thought was a bit out of the ordinary. But I began to describe a tree that I like to sit under. And he said to me, oh yes, he said, I like trees. He said, if you look up, you can see the branches. Can you hear the wind blowing through the leaves? And I did. I looked up and I could actually see the branches.
As the amnesic effects of the drug wore off, Catherine and her partner tried to confront the full horror of what had happened. They both remain afraid of being identified for fear of retribution from Catherine's rapists.
I got a flashback of this terrible memory, and then I began to get really bad pains around my abdomen, and my hips were aching. And my partner noticed that I was walking with a bit of a limp. And I got this flashback of memory which it shocked me to the point where I had some sort of seizure, and the doctor had to be called.
Shocked into reliving her experience, this unlocked the door to an unbelievable nightmare.
Well, the chap that I'd gone to do the work for had actually sprayed himself with some sort of cologne or something, because it smelled quite strong, because he'd been doing a job and he was sweating, and I think he was conscious of that, so he'd sprayed something on. And my underwear smelled really strongly of that. Yeah, I couldn't understand how it had got onto my underwear. I mean, you know, it's driving me crazy. I'm thinking, what's happening here?
From what I could see in her physical and mental state over the first couple of weeks, and from what I could piece together from flashes of recall, that basically she had been the victim of a well-planned crime, where, from what I can see, she was enticed to these premises on a false pretext. She was drugged, repeatedly raped, and filmed, from what we can gather.
And I began to remember more things, and it actually went from bad to worse. I could see a man's face, another man, a second man, actually above me. And I felt that I was laid on my back, yet I had no body sensation. I couldn't feel my back on the floor, yet I was looking up, and I can see the face above me, but I couldn't feel the weight or anything on top of me. Yet his face was contorted, and he was sweating, and his hair was spiky. And there were lights, there was some bright light that was round me. And I didn't like it, and I can remember turning my head down and trying to get away from the lights, and being told again, look up, look up. And it was quite painful to look up, because my arms were bound above me, and it was hurting my neck, and I was feeling so desperate. And I could hear noises behind me, and they were all male voices. And I know there was an animal behind me, and it was a rustling noise it was making, and I was frightened of it. I was conscious of actually blacking out there. I remember I just thought I died.
You know, for somebody who's just a straightforward, ordinary girl, to find herself starring in what's effectively a pornographic video is to me outlandish. The fact that they, at one stage in this case, thought that they'd killed her, and she could hear them talking over her head, discussing what they were going to do with the body. And what I found so awful about this was that when they realised they hadn't killed her, they raped her again.
Yeah, if I just take a couple of details from you, please. Can I just take your name?
The phenomenon of drug rape poses a new challenge for the police. With a victim who only has dreamlike recall of the events, and with little or no physical evidence to offer, the police also seem powerless to act.
It's extremely difficult to get rape cases to court anyway, even when there is a full account available, you know, of what has happened. So Rohypnol makes it doubly difficult. Any drug that takes away that memory makes it very difficult for us to investigate the facts, to prove conclusively that the offender, you know, did abuse those circumstances, and maybe on occasion was so reckless and took away that woman's right to consent, as it were.
But how can consensual sex ever be given when the intended victim is neither of sound mind or body? Without the physical evidence that they have been drugged, what hope is there of disproving that consent was ever given? The prosecuting authorities in America have already begun to find ways of dealing with the crime of drug rape.
At first, when we had these cases, yes, we did have police officers kind of scratching their heads thinking, you know, how do I deal with this? I have a victim in here that doesn't remember anything. I have a victim in here that has come in 2 weeks late, and I have a case where there's no physical evidence. And I have a bar full of people that said she willingly walked out with them. Well, if you're not trained to recognize the symptoms of somebody's drugs and what it can do to you, then all of that adds up to a consensual sex case. And you would have every reason to suspect that, you know, there's no viable case here, and to not really do much about it. And that's unfortunately what was happening. But as we were able to educate our detectives on you know, the sophisticated nature of this case and the types of symptoms that you can expect, then they were able to bring the victims in and you know, conduct a proper investigation.
From the moment they gave us that drug, they changed what we would do otherwise, you know. And I don't know, I have no memory of it. I don't know what I said yes and no to. I have no memory of that, you know. So the only thing is physical evidence, and that drug, or whatever drug they used, kind of allowed them to not have any physical evidence to prove it, you know, because there wasn't anything, you know, anything, Agatha's pregnancy and anything that happened to us could have happened through consensual sex, could have, you know, and so it went that time. There wasn't sufficient physical evidence, because that's what it boils down to. The fact that two intelligent, educated women could come up with such an amazingly complex story with all those details. And, you know, what my point is that, you know, if you put me in front of a whole bunch of people, the jury, you know, they would believe me, because what possible motivation have I got for making up that story?
On the Roofy file, would you do a letter, please, to the Detective Chief Inspector again? Dear Jim, re-alleged drug rape case. There's no system set up for these victims to achieve any justice at this stage. The police don't have a uniform approach. Different areas of the country, we've had reports of the police handling these cases in a very different sort of way. Since Christmas Eve, we've had 260 calls from victims. We've had lots of other calls as well from people wanting information, but these are genuine victims. And we've not taken names or phone numbers unless they've particularly wanted to leave them. But sadly, some of these calls are from perfectly ordinary straight guys who've been raped by other men. And they're the ones who are in the most traumatised state, because they're so ashamed, because there's nothing unusual about these men. They're just straightforward, normal, everyday men who you would meet every day of your life, and they've had this tragedy happen to them at the hands of ruthless, usually 3 or 4 older men. And they can't tell their parents, they can't tell their girlfriends, their wives, or anyone else. They daren't go to the doctors, they daren't do anything. And it's their lives, they're saying, our lives are over, my life is over, I can't live with this feeling. And that, to me, is where the system is totally failing people. There must be some kind of counselling that could be offered to these people. They're all over the country, and they're ringing us from everywhere.
Aren't the police here simply not treating this issue seriously enough in comparison to the way in which it's being treated in the United States?
No, I reject that. I mean, Rohypnol has been found, you know, in hundreds of cases in the United States, from what I'm told. We are alert, as I said to you before, that at the start of this interview, we've been alert to some time to the strong probability that Rohypnol is going to surface here and be used in the way that it has been in the United States. There simply hasn't been the cases of Rohypnol being found, to the degree that have been in the United States, for us to say with some certainty, well, it's a significant problem.
But Rohypnol is only one drug among many other benzodiazepines now being used in sexual assaults. So why are the numbers of drug rape cases being reported on the helpline so much higher than those being reported to the police?
I can't give you the perfect explanation, but we already know that rape and any sexual attack is a grossly underreported crime for a number of sociological reasons. I would have put the figure that we were probably seeing 1 case in 10 reported to the police.
She's just helping me with it.
An hour after being given a Rohypnol pill, Becky finds it difficult to walk and is brought back for further tests.
We have another story, so just like before, like listening to the news on the radio. Okay, so if you could concentrate and try and remember it.
Different versions of the earlier experiments were conducted.
A French oil tanker sank 5 miles off the Suffolk coast last night. The crew were picked up by a British fishing boat. An oil slick has already formed, and the conservationists are worried about the effects on wildlife. Local enthusiasts are mounting an operation to save any birds found stranded on the beaches.
Okay, can you tell me what you remember?
Some kind of oil spill, and people are worried about protecting wildlife, I think on the south coast.
Can you say a bit more? You were saying about you feel like things don't really matter. Do you feel in any sense disinhibited? Like you would behave in ways different from your normal state? Or say from when you just had a couple of drinks?
Yeah, I would, because I would actually, I think. I think put in a different situation, I mean here it's different, but I think if I was out in a bar or a club or at a party or something, I could see myself behaving out of character. And yet there's still some sort of sense of I've lost the thread of what I was saying. I think I was going to say I still felt vaguely in control, but I think I've changed my mind.
Her physical and mental responses had become severely impaired. This experience was accompanied by frequent blackouts. Becky was then asked to recall the oil slick story.
Okay. Now if you can go back to the story you heard on the tape just before, can you tell me what you remember of the story?
£800,000 stolen from Sir Charles Melton in Cheshire by some thieves who took antiques and jewellery.
Can you tell me the story that you had just before, not the one that you had an hour or so ago?
You played my story?
The one we played this time. That was the one you had a while ago, the most recent story.
I don't remember you playing this story.
Before you did the computer test, I played you another story. That, I mean, you were quite right, the £8,000 one was before, over an hour and a half, 2 hours ago. Do you remember me playing you a story?
No. What was it about?
I'm not meant to tell you that.
No, I can't remember.
Once you factor in the effects of the drug, then victims learn, people in general learn, detectives learn that these kind of things aren't necessarily present in a drug rape case, and you can't trust your first instinct. You can't have that rush to judgment to think, aha, this was a consensual case, show her the door, nothing really happened to her. Now, something may have happened, and if you're educated and not ignorant on this, and know that these drugs do these certain things, then you'll know that the woman was kissing the guy because she's under an influence of the drug, and it loosens your inhibitions. The man walked her out into the parking lot because she didn't know where she was walking anyway. The woman's clothes weren't ripped off her because she was passed out at the time. There was no fluids inside of her because the defendant had the luxury of taking his time and making sure that he didn't leave evidence behind. Obviously, there are many other avenues that we travel in our investigation to try to convict these people, but I don't really think it's appropriate for me to reveal all of the tricks up our sleeve at this point because I don't want to alert anybody as to how to pull off the perfect crime.
But in Britain, one of the key problems facing victims is that the police have not recognized that the investigation of drug rape requires a different approach.
I'm not going to draw a distinction between drug rape and any other rape allegation. I don't believe we've got the resources to actually create a helpline specifically for Rohypnol or any sort of date rape drug for that matter. I like to believe that there are sufficient trained officers at each station. If a woman went into a London police station and said, I've been attacked, very quickly she'd be seen by someone who's had a great deal of training in how to receive that victim, how to take from her a full account of what's happened, and in a way that's able to, we're then able to prosecute that case, you know, if there is sufficient evidence at the end of the day. I've got great confidence in that, and in many ways the Met has led the field, and that's the sort of arrangement you'll see in well, most parts of the country now.
I phoned my local police station, and the man on the phone basically just told me that I had to be careful if I went into the West End, and that would I like to pop into a police station, and I asked him which police station I should pop into, whether I should go to them, Covent Garden, Fulham, where should I go? And he said, well, when you're passing by, pop in and if you'd like to make a statement. And it was fairly obvious to me that he didn't believe the story I was telling him.
Our difficulty is going to be in proving to the Crown Prosecution Service in the first place, and a court at the end of the day, that you did not give your consent to that happening. Now, if a date rape drug took away your ability to consent reasonably to what took place, that's clearly something we've got to take into account. Now, I don't welcome that, and clearly these women are coming forward believing they're victims, and I hope we treat them as victims, and I hope we treat them, as I said before, with sensitivity and with some compassion.
I am appalled by the way the police handled it. Police forces in general need to, first of all, recognise that such crimes exist, but then be trained how to deal with them appropriately. It's a bit like piecing a jigsaw together, and it's fairly evident that when a report of this type of crime is made, the police need to be sensitive to the possibility that it is actually true, rather than dismissing it out of hand because they have no experience of it. They then need to recognise that it will be a slow, painstaking process of piecing this jigsaw together.
They wrote a statement out for me, and I didn't even see what it said. I wasn't interested. I was just told to sign it, which I did. And they said to me then, they said, you do realise he's very rich? So I said, possibly. You know, he's got quite a few businesses and drives an expensive car. And they said, well, are we talking blackmail here? And I didn't understand what they meant.
The perpetrator was interviewed, and we are told that the perpetrator told them that he hadn't done it. He'd not laid a finger on them. And we got back from the police a statement the perpetrator had made that they supported that he was a good Christian man from a good, God-fearing family. Now, that's a great variance with the perception of this particular individual in the community he lives. I mean, I'm giving no secrets away when I say it's generally held that he deals in pornographic videos, that he deals in drugs, that he is a man with aggressive sexual appetites. This is a very rich man who's been known and heard to say in the community that the police will never, ever arrest him.
So why did you sign a statement saying that it had never happened, without even reading it?
I didn't even read it, so I don't know what he actually said. But I just wanted it to go away, and I didn't want it to have happened. And to me, that was making it all go away. And they said it can't have possibly happened. So I said, are you telling me this hasn't happened? And I was quite relieved that they felt that, because I was looking for excuses. If they told me, if they certified me insane there on the spot, I'd have agreed to it.
One of the problems we find is that detectives need to know that when they're dealing with this kind of victim suffers a very enhanced form of trauma versus what a normal victim suffers. If I'm a victim and I'm raped at knife point, a man comes up and puts a knife to my throat and drags me into an alley and rapes me, that's a traumatic situation for me. I have to live with that the rest of my life. I have to play that over and over in my mind, but at least I know what happened to me. If I'm a drug rape victim, I have a quick snapshot of this guy on top of me, but I don't know what happened. I don't know if 10 guys were on top of me. I don't know if he dragged me out in the field. I don't know what he did to me. All I'm left with is the mercy of my imagination.
No formula is yet available whereby Rohypnol can be traced within a victim's body after 72 hours. But given the increasing controversy surrounding this drug, its manufacturers, Hoffmann-La Roche, have introduced a blue dye into the newly formulated pill, but it takes 20 minutes to turn blue.
I don't think that the blue dye is in any way helpful. To me, actually, the drug has no place in modern medicine. There are other available drugs, and since this has such a terrible reputation right now, I think that it would be a good idea to totally restrict its use.
It takes 20 minutes for the full effects of this pill to become apparent, and in that time, if I have a shot glass placed in front of me, I'm not waiting 20 minutes to drink it. I'm waiting seconds. So could they do more? Yes. Have they taken a step in the right direction? Yes, they have. And I'm confident that Hoffman LaRoche, being a responsible corporation, is going to go ahead and make that panacea a little more effective than what they've done so far.
It's all about money for Hoffman LaRoche. They make $100 million a year off this drug. Are our lives not worth that? Give me a break. What if it was their child or one of them, or, I would love to have a one-on-one with Hoffman LaRoche. I would love to, because I am so angry at them. I think I'm more angry at them than I am my rapist.
Hoffman LaRoche are a Swiss-based company. Their headquarters in Britain are at Welwyn Garden City. Despite repeated requests, the corporation refused to be interviewed for this film.
That there was a 15-year-old girl that lives very close to me that went to a Sweet 16 party. She was a virgin, she was slipped roofies, and she was gangbanged. I think about that little girl all the time. She can't speak out, so I'm going to do it for her. I want to be the voice for the women that can't speak out, that just can't do it. I'm also somebody's daughter, I may be a big girl, but it hurts no matter what age you are. But that particular case just took my heart. I have 2 little girls of my own. And if anything like this ever happened to them, I don't know what I would do. I mean, I would not be able to handle it.
In Britain, the crime of drug rape remains a terrifying enigma we have still to confront. Condemned to live with their ordeal, its countless victims continue to shoulder the full, horrifying burden alone.
I would like to challenge the Home Office to establishing their own helpline, and they can listen to the harrowing tales of destroyed lives that we hear and decide for themselves whether anything needs to be done.
We are looking for the best possible evidence. If it doesn't exist, well, it means, with regret, we cannot take that case to court. And that's something that society is going to have to face up to.
I thought we had a right to have a voice, and we don't. We don't. And unless that changes, we never will. And women that it's going to repeatedly happen to will never have a voice. And it's wrong. It's fundamentally wrong.
This is a different dimension to drug crime, and it needs taking on board and dealing with. And it's an awful thing to say. I think this is the tip of the iceberg. I think it's been going on, and it will continue to go on tenfold. And I think there are victims that will come out of the woodwork that have just quietly been sat going insane somewhere.
I don't know, because I live in fear at the moment. I'm scared of everything, really. I am just trying to restart, really, that's all. I couldn't tell you now. I'm sorry.